Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So this video is going to be how to cut and sew a straight simple skirt, and as part of the skirt edit series here on my channel. So for this video you are going to need your fully finished pattern for the skirt, so I'll link that video down below. So to get started you're going to need to gather all your supplies. So for the skirt you're going to need your patterns, some fabric. I'm going to be working with calico, and then you're going to need some lining and a zip. So now go ahead and lay out your fabric on the fold. Make sure that you've ironed it and that it's all ready to be worked with. So taking the front skirt pattern piece, you're going to line the centre front of the pattern to the fold edge of your fabric, and then you're going to pin it in place. So now taking the back pattern piece, I'm going to line this up with the side of the front pattern. I'm going to pin that in place too. So when laying out my patterns, I like to try and line them up as close together as possible, and this is simply just to avoid having too much fabric waste. So using fabric scissors, you're going to go ahead and cut out both of these patterns. Make sure that you snip in your notches on the side seam, the zip notch and your darts. Here I'm marking in the ends of my darts so I can clearly see them on all the pieces. So I've done this using a pen just for this demo, but on good fabric I'd usually use a chalk pencil or tailor's chalk. So when you unpin the patterns, you should have two separate back pieces and you should have one full front piece. So now I'm going to repeat this process for the lining of the skirt. So I'm going to pin all the patterns in place, and then I'm going to cut them out and mark in all the notches and the dart points. And like the outer skirt, you're going to have two back pieces and one front piece. So now let's move on to the sewing. So we're going to start by sewing in the darts on the front and the back of the skirt. So to do this, you're simply going to fold over the fabric to the wrong side and make sure that your darts meet up together. Then grabbing the dot that we marked in at the end of your dart, you're going to fold the fabric over onto itself. Hopefully the video explains it a bit better than I did. So now you're going to start sewing from the notches down to meet that dot. So you'll actually be sewing at an angle, and you're going to repeat this for all 6 darts. So a tip that I always found helpful was to mark the wrong sides of your fabric pieces, just to make sure that you don't get confused with which is the front and which is the back. And this just works really well for any fabric that's just plain. Once all your darts are sewn in, you can go ahead and lie down the front of your skirt so that the right side of the fabric is facing up towards you. So now we're going to go in and we're going to place down the back pieces on top of the front, and you're going to do it so that the back pieces are facing down onto the front of the skirt, and then you're going to pin these pieces together along the side seams. So before sewing, I usually like to overlock my fabric pieces, but I don't currently have an overlocker. So another option you could do is a French seam, or you could use pinking shears just to tidy up your raw hems and avoid too much fraying. But for this demo, I'm just going to leave my seams raw. But for a finished skirt, I highly recommend that you overlock your pieces. Now go ahead and sew down your side seams using a 1 cm seam allowance. So before moving on, I like to trim off the excess threads and then iron out my seams flat. So now I'm going to jump straight into the lining. Like the front, I sewed all the darts first, and now I'm pinning the side seams together, and I'm going to sew them down using a 1 cm seam allowance. So now you can start to see your skirt taking shape. So taking the skirt and its lining, you're going to pin the right side of the skirt to the right side of the lining along the waist, and make sure that your darts on the skirt line up nicely with the darts on your lining, and then you're going to sew these together using your 1 cm seam allowance. If you can remember back to the pattern, we actually added the 0.5 centimeters to the front of the skirt, but this isn't going to affect your sewing, so you're simply just going to use your 1 cm seam allowance, and that extra 0.5 centimeters will just be a little allowance for the front of the skirt to roll back slightly later. So like the side seams, I went ahead and I ironed out the waist seam and trimmed off any excess threads. So for the back of the skirt, we're going to pin the seams together, starting from the notch for your zip, and pin it right down to the hem. We're going to leave the top half open because we'll be putting in our zip then in a few minutes. So now you can sew them together using 1 cm seam allowance. So once you've it sewn and you've ironed out your seams flat, we're going to start pinning in the zip. I don't currently have an in-depth video for inserting a regular zip, but I'm sure there are plenty on YouTube. So if you'd like me to film an in-depth one, let me know down in the comments below. Okay, so now that the zip is pinned in place, we're going to use the zipper foot to sew it in. So try and sew as close to the zip teeth as you can, but don't go too close that you could catch the zip teeth and ruin your zip. If you don't like working with the pins, you could tack down the zip first before sewing it in. So now that the zip is sewn in, you can trim off all the excess threads and then open and close the zip just to make sure that it doesn't catch in the fabric and that you're 100% happy with the placing. Now we can move on to the lining. So like before, you're going to pin the back seams together, starting from the zip notch down to the hem, and then sew them together using a 1 cm seam allowance. So this part can be a little bit more tricky. So I'm pinning the lining to the zip, but this time the zip is going to be sandwiched between the lining and the skirt fabric. So at the top of the zip, I'm going to pull out that excess zip material, and this is going to be sewn into the seam so that it's hidden and it won't stick out on the front of the skirt. So now go ahead and sew as close to the zipper teeth as you can get, but again, just be careful because this time you can't actually see the zip because it's hidden under the lining. But you're going to repeat these steps for the other side of the zip as well. So now that the zip is done, you can turn it through and make sure you can open and close it without any problems. So now just go back in and trim off the excess zipper material and just maybe cut in a little notch up in the corner just to minimize the bulk when you turn it around the right way. And there we have a nice clean finish with no bulk. So you can go ahead now and turn your skirt the right way around for the final step. Okay, so for the hem we've allowed 4 centimeter seam allowance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up the hem by 1 centimeter. I'm going to iron it flat the entire way around the skirt. Then I'm going to fold up the remaining 3 centimeters and iron this flat too. By ironing it, it just makes it much easier to work with. So from here you could sew it down using your machine, but my machine actually started to act up unfortunately, so I done all this by hand. So using needle and thread, I just done a blind hem on both the skirt fabric and the lining. But again, you can do whatever you want with your hem. If you want your stitches to be seen, you can just sew it on your machine. You could even use some hemming tape, whatever you decide. So I actually done the lining off camera just because it took a little bit more time. So I really hope you enjoyed this video and that you're liking the skirt edit series. If you are, please let me know down in the comments below. So if you did enjoy this video, please hit that like button as it really supports my channel, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye guys!